our panel today. Rosalie Layton is with us. She's a visiting researcher at Aalborg University's Center for Communication, Media and Information Technologies in Copenhagen in Denmark. She's American, so she's very aware of the global situation of net neutrality both in Europe and in the US, which is very interesting. David Frautzi Heredia, I hope I pronounced it correctly. He's a Senior Director for European Government and Regulatory Affairs at Internet Society, ISOC, one of the most relevant stakeholders in the multi-stakeholder scene of the Internet, right? Thank you, David, also for being with us today. So, and they will make a 15 minutes intervention to express their opinions on the subject. And here with me, we have four very relevant stakeholders of the sector in Spain. On my left-hand side, Eusebio Felguera, Head of Digital Public Policy of Telefónica. Here closer to me, Andret Sastre, Regulatory Affairs of Vodafone. Here on my right, Maria Merino, Manager of Regulation, Competition and Contents of Orange Spain. And a little bit farther, we have Ignacio Vela from Google, Government Affairs and Public Policy Manager at Google in Spain. So thank you very much to the fourth of you as well for accepting this hopefully interesting format of commenting the opinions of two highly relevant experts. So, and from my side, just a quick introduction on the topic. You know, this net neutrality topic, it came up like 2003, so we are also celebrating an anniversary as Telefónica and Google, 20 years discussing about the net neutrality issue, which came up with one academic paper by Professor Tim Wu on net neutrality broadband discrimination, he said. And it was a proposal to guarantee open internet in the context of the deregulation of the local loop unbundling in the US. So different context from what we have yesterday, and we've been discussing for about 20 years about this topic. Of course, it has this debate has taken different shapes. First, we discuss about blocking, then throttling, then fast lanes, zero rating, and now revisited in light of the slightly different but related debate of the fair share that we have also just had. What's new on net neutrality so this year? So this is what we will be discussing in the context of the previous panel. It came up already that we have a net neutrality regulation in Europe. And there's no longer such a regulation in the US, so interesting, a different situation from the original one. Without further ado, let's go first with Rosalie, please. Yeah, you have 15 minutes. I will try to be very sharp with the timing because I am teaching at 3. So let's try to stick to the schedule. Okay, thank you so much. And the floor is yours, Rosalie.
Everyone. Can you see my slide?
We see your slides. Let's see if they can raise up the volume a little bit so that he can hear you better.
I can also put in some headphones. Try that. Maybe that will help a little bit better. Should have put that before. Sorry. Go quickly. Here we go. Is this any better? Is this any better?
I do hear you fine.
Okay, how about, I hope the audience can hear?
Yeah? Okay, yeah.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and my apologies to do this in English. My high school Spanish teacher is turning over in her grave. I'm sorry about that. I'll have to fix that next time. But, so let me present to you an overview of my remarks. I want to discuss my PhD.
Rosalie, sorry to interrupt you. I think it was better without the headset.
Without the headset.
Yeah. Sorry. And here, if they can raise the volume a little bit up.
I'll raise the volume. I'll try to be closer.
But here, you don't need to worry. Just here.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so 5 points I'd like to cover. My PhD, which focused on net neutrality, how we might measure impacts to consumers, innovation, and investment, some other academic interpretations of net neutrality, some alternatives, and then a point on the EU fair share and why it does not violate net neutrality. So I was very fortunate to earn my PhD at Aalborg University as part of Denmark's industrial PhD program. It's open to any student in the world, provided you come to Denmark. And I studied this policy over 5 years across 53 countries. And I looked at countries with hard rules, soft rules, and no rules. And I measured the resulting local innovation on mobile networks with 2 enterprise analytics platforms. My hypothesis was that countries with hard net neutrality rules should produce more innovation. And for example, if we accept the premise, we should be using innovation from India. Lots of innovators there, net neutrality rules. So that's what I was looking for. So to make this more, to give you an idea, both USA and European Union adopted net neutrality rules, and they specifically said this is going to preserve innovation. The internet is a platform for innovation, and we should have some way to measure this if this is the case. We've had rules for 10 years across many countries, with rules, without rules, so we've had a natural experiment. And to make this more proper as an academic assessment, we also had to look closely at 2 similar countries that had different rules. So Denmark, small country, but high digital society, similar to Netherlands. Again, high digital society, but Netherlands started a net neutrality rule in 2012, which was a price control on what's called zero rating. And then Denmark chose self-regulation with provisions for user rights, transparency, and quality guarantee. And then the Netherlands had rules against blocking, throttling, and no price differentiation. So what did we learn over this period? What's interesting is that the countries that had soft rules over the period, of course, remember in 2016, everybody in EU moved to the European rules. But prior to that, we saw a lot of apps emerging from UK, Sweden, Switzerland, South Korea, France. But interestingly, the countries with the hard rules early on had relatively less local innovation. And then what's interesting is countries with no rules at all, like Australia, has never had rules. They have been very innovative. And even today, they are producing a lot of video games and so on, similar to New Zealand. And then, of course, we can look at USA, which has always been producing a lot of innovation. Now, if you can look closer at Denmark and Netherlands, both of these countries are very innovative, producing a lot of innovation locally, but this doesn't tell you the whole story. If we go more closely, we could see that the average Danish mobile app improved in rank between 2012 to 2016, increasing from 41 to 26, whereas the average Dutch app fell in popularity from 31 to 42. And also, over the time, Denmark produced an app called Subway Surfers, became extremely popular globally, and received more downloads and revenue than the top 18 Dutch apps. So again, this doesn't tell you the whole story. What's also interesting, during this period, the Danish mobile operators had more flexibility to make partnerships, to price differential pricing. They could do fixed pricing, for example. And so over the time, Denmark advanced 4G and postpaid subscriptions, whereas Holland did not advance these
they stayed relatively slowly on postpaid. They did not change their postpaid versus prepaid. And that matters because you want to advance people onto 4G and smartphones. So this sort of showed that the flexibility for the mobile operators to price in a differential way was important to advance the ecosystem, and it created a critical mass for innovators in Denmark. Now, if we look at Europe since 2016, look at 10 years ago, Europe had many of the most largest platforms were in the top 20. There are none today. The largest European enterprise is maybe at number 50, Spotify. And over the period of time, when we've had net neutrality rules, the US internet sector has become extremely dominant. Now it's 70% of the internet value. China taking up 20% or so, quite large. And today, Europe is less than 2% of the total value. And later this year, Africa will surpass Europe in internet value. So if the idea was to guarantee Europe as an innovation engine, these rules have not worked. So this is a kind of unfortunate outcome from the European perspective, but it's great for USA. Now, how do we explain this? Classical regulation, which is what I teach at the university, we describe regulation as the need to fix a market failure, where we intervene in the market, address the anti-competitive practice, and we hope that the market returns to competition. But what's going on with net neutrality is really something called regulatory capture. This is defined by Nobel Prize winner George Stigler, and he described that regulation is acquired by companies and operated for their benefit. And in this case, we can see that net neutrality has really been a policy pursued by big tech to protect its status quo. Note that all of the big tech players today from USA, they were all founded pretty much prior to 2010 when net neutrality came into place. And so we see the large players have essentially cemented their dominance. Now, I say this because the Stigler Center, where George Stigler was at University of Chicago, today is the hotbed of progressive antitrust. And they asked me to write this op-ed. Tim Wu, who was mentioned before, he's affiliated with this school, and he declined to respond to my article. But basically, Tim Wu was concerned about gatekeepers preventing innovation. He was concerned about ISP stopping innovation. Well, today we have a new gatekeeper, and it's big tech. And so we're very concerned that small innovators are not able to challenge the platforms. And in fact, the only challenge that we see to big tech largely comes from China, where there's no net neutrality rules and where they've been blocking all foreign data and for 20 years or so. So mine is hardly the only explanation. There are Spanish game theorists from University of Valencia, and they describe that tech companies have flourished. They exclude the minor competitors from the internet, and they're basically disrespecting the net neutrality principle. Similarly, leading antitrust scholars in the progressive vein, like Oles Andriuk, said that our rules in Europe are too hard. We don't have to have these hard rules to get good outcomes. And the rules we have today prevent disruptive innovation for European players. And I'd also suggest this political science perspective, similar to George Stigler, but Sidney Tarrow in 2005 described transnational activism. And if you go to the Tech Transparency Project, you can see that the large entities supporting net neutrality are largely associated with tech companies, though not entirely. But for example, the leading foundations, they all have portfolios that are largely invested in tech stocks. So we can look at the leading activists for this field. They all are in some way associated with a set of funders who want this particular agenda. So what does it mean in Europe today? I think a number of developments are causing regulators to question the hard approach. If you look, for example, in Europe, as it was described by the Dutch regulator, there will be no more free internet in Europe. For example, Ukrainian refugees were offered free internet when they came following the invasion from Russia. That violates European net neutrality rules. In the United States today, 3 million veterans use an app for healthcare. That violates the net neutrality rules in Europe. And especially in emerging countries where there are poor people who have very tailored bundles for their budget. For example, in South Africa, where you buy YouTube-only packages and so on, that also violates European net neutrality rules. So it's a concern that some of the most important things to help the disadvantaged, these kinds of offerings are considered illegal. Now, if you look at your UK, now that it's revisited its program, they found that during the pandemic, that free healthcare and free education apps were illegal. They had to vacate their rules to offer these free services. They're also in process to update their rules because end users are being blocked from special high and low end offers. And they're concerned that there's a lack of innovation amongst telecom operators because the rules are too strict. Similar in USA, rules were in place for about 2 years. The investment fell by 5%, but once removed, the investment returned. In the case of USA, it's considered a violation of free speech because people are forced under net neutrality to pay for the advertising data equally to the actual data that they want. Advertising is perhaps 25% or more of a typical mobile subscription, and this violates the First Amendment of the US Constitution. And moreover, Americans consistently reject net neutrality law in Congress because they prefer competition and innovation over price controls. So you'll see in USA that net neutrality is very driven on a partisan line at the FCC, but Americans overall have typically not wanted to have a net neutrality law. Now, I would suggest there's some hypocrisy today because if you are an online newspaper, you can offer a free service and then have advertising. Similar to Netflix, they have an advertising supported model. And telecom operators would like to have these kinds of models, but they're illegal under the net neutrality regime. You're forced to pay for advertising, whether you like it or not. It's not the content you request, but you have to pay for it. You must value it equally. And this, I see, seems to not be in line with end user rights, particularly the GDPR. Similarly, in Europe, as we all know, we're behind in 5G, which is unfortunate because 5G standards come out of Europe. We make the patents here, but we don't enjoy the benefits. No leading 5G nation has a hard net neutrality rule. You can see US is now the global leader in adoption, similar to South Korea. The best we can do in Europe is Denmark and Switzerland, but still below 50% adoption. We also know investment has been very low, and that's, I think, probably covered in other panels. And then I'd suggest there's some alternatives. We can use competition law, as is done in the United States today. In fact, the Federal Trade Commission made a $60 million enforcement on AT&T, Australia, New Zealand. We can look at multi-stakeholder models, which were used in UK and Denmark, and our guidelines, which is South Korea and Japan. And then finally, with regard to fair share, the EU net neutrality law is about the broadband provider and the end user on the last mile. There's no blocking, throttling, or prioritization. And if we can recover revenue, however it's done, whether it's collected by government or operators, we can have networks to be more accessible for end users. And importantly, that the ISPs themselves are not punishing their users when content providers refuse to pay costs to operate the network. Finally, I would suggest that we don't have to have hard rules in Europe to protect openness. Soft rules are sufficient. And we should explore modernization the way other regulators are looking at it. And I thank you for your attention today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Rosalind. So before we follow up with your presentation, and I would like to hear from David before. So we have now a second slot of 15 minutes. Can you hear us?
Sí, pero hay eco. No sé si es solo para mí o si el eco se oye en la sala.
Sí, se escucha eco, sí. Sí.
Es una lástima. Bueno, si lo consiguen arreglar los
sí,
técnicos. En cualquier caso, me voy a presentar. Soy David. Me parece una pena hacer la presentación en inglés y lo he hablado con la ponente anterior. Siendo español y dirigiéndome a una audiencia española, pues me parece una pena utilizar el idioma inglés, así que voy a utilizar el español. Y si hay alguna cosa que queramos intercambiar con la ponente norteamericana, pues luego pasamos al inglés. Y quiero puntualizar una cosa que ella ha mencionado en su presentación y me va a servir de modo de presentación a lo que es Internet Society para aquellos que no lo conocen. Ella comenta que que nos financia Big Tech. Bueno, pues en parte sí, pero una parte muy pequeña. También ETNO, que es la Asociación de Operadores de Telecomunicaciones aquí en Bruselas, también nos financia una parte muy pequeña, apenas el 15%. El resto del dinero que supone nuestro presupuesto viene de la gestión de dominio.org, y esto fue un regalo estupendo que nos hizo la gente que nos creó hace 30 años, los mismos pioneros que crearon Internet, y que nos da una total independencia en lo que decimos y en lo que hacemos. Entonces, bueno, no hablamos por Big Tech, no hablamos por las telco, aunque a ambos los tenemos como miembros de la asociación porque creen en nuestra misión, porque creen que fortalecer Internet y tener Internet robusta es bueno para todos. Entonces, bueno, eso a modo de interpretación, a modo de presentación de Internet Society. He prestado mucha atención al panel anterior. Me da pena que se haya polarizado, igual que se polariza aquí en Bruselas este debate. Esto no va entre Big Tech y telcos. Está mal planteado así, lo siento. Esto va de todo el mundo contra las telcos, porque en realidad lo que se está poniendo aquí en riesgo es la existencia misma de Internet tal y como la conocemos. Esta propuesta de las telcos de hacer contribuciones monetarias por tráfico va en contra completamente de cómo funciona Internet. Entonces, bueno, yo quiero hacer una serie de puntualizaciones sobre lo que se ha comentado antes y luego entrar en harina con el tema de la neutralidad. Se ha hablado de market failure o de falla de mercado, pero yo creo que se ha hablado de manera un poco frívola, que si las empresas de Internet tienen capitalización bursátil muy grande y los telcos pequeña, que si el retorno de la inversión son muchos años o el 5% nada más. Bueno, pues es el modelo de negocio, si hay que revisar eso, revísese, pero eso no es una falla de mercado. Y los reguladores han sido bien claros en este análisis, es gente seria que lo miran con detalle. BEREC, el regulador francés, hace, aquí no hay falla de mercado, por lo tanto no hay intervención regulatoria necesaria para arreglar un problema que no existe. Parece, alguien lo comentó antes, que esto es un problema en busca de una solución y esto es una manera peligrosa de hacer las cosas. Como he comentado antes, nosotros no tomamos partido ni por telcos ni por Big Tech, nosotros tomamos partido por la Internet y esto es lo que tenemos en juego sobre la mesa, que Internet se mantenga tal y como la conocemos, porque la propuesta que hay es realmente nefasta. Yo he escuchado las cosas que han dicho los telcos y la verdad es que llevo años escuchando la misma historia, que si estamos en un momento crítico para realizar las inversiones, que si hay un problema que no tenemos dinero. Bueno, lo llevo escuchando muchísimos años y aquí seguimos. Cuando uno mira los informes para los inversores, la película es completamente diferente. Hay dinero, se está haciendo bien, la virtualización de las redes va a ayudar muchísimo, el tráfico se está gestionando con éxito, no hay congestiones y esto mismo refleja en los análisis de los reguladores, como el último que hubo sobre la situación de Internet por ARCEP, regulador francés, durante este verano. Entonces, bueno, esto es un debate en Bruselas muy candente. La Comisión Europea, con el comisario Breton, lo lleva como un tema abanderado, pero en realidad aquí, si uno mira las contribuciones a la consulta pública, verá que esto es, de un lado, las empresas de telecomunicaciones y sus asociaciones diversas, móviles, fijas, todas ellas, y en el lado opuesto, todos los otros actores de la sociedad civil, los consumidores, académicos, creadores de contenido, dueños de contenido. Estamos en una situación en la que realmente no hay nadie que apoye esta propuesta. Entonces, quería también comentar algo que se ha hablado sobre Corea del Sur. Evidentemente, Corea del Sur fue durante muchísimos años un modelo de despliegue de banda ancha, sin duda. En los rankings de la OCDE era el país que mejor salía en la foto, pero desde que han puesto en marcha estas propuestas han ido degradando todos sus indicadores, y ahora, por ejemplo, son el farolillo rojo en temas como latencia, que impacta directamente a los consumidores. Nosotros hemos hecho un análisis de la situación en Corea del Sur y hay un incremento de dominancia por parte de los operadores de telecomunicaciones, hay un incremento de precios al consumidor final y el tema de la latencia que ya he comentado antes. Se ha hablado de este acuerdo entre Netflix y la operadora SKT que ha terminado en un acuerdo comercial. Y claro, precisamente es esto lo que hay que hacer, acuerdos comerciales. Nadie dice que no haya que hacer acuerdos comerciales. Quería enseñar una foto y vaya, porque no la tengo en la pantalla. Un momento, a ver si la consigo colocar. Bueno, ahora mientras hablo, a ver si la... Un momento. No sé si se ve. ¿Me lo confirmáis?
Se ve. Sí.
Sí. Bueno, el señor de la derecha lo conocemos todos, es José María Álvarez Payete, presidente de Telefónica. El señor de la izquierda es consejero delegado de Netflix. Hicieron un acuerdo, como se ve en la pantalla de abajo, hace 5 años. No hay ningún problema. Un acuerdo comercial, pues esto es lo que debe ser. Lo que no puede ser es no puede ser, nosotros no vemos adecuado, una obligación a negociar, porque esto va en contra de cómo funciona Internet y de cómo es la arquitectura. Y aquí ya entramos en el tema de la neutralidad de red. Hay un principio básico. Para que una red que tiene interés en conectarse a Internet pueda hacerlo, basta con que llegue a un acuerdo con una red única que ya esté conectada a Internet. Eso da acceso a que cualquier usuario en el planeta pueda conectarse a esa nueva red que se incorpora a Internet. Y esto es así, esa es la arquitectura. Este principio tan básico es lo que hace que Internet ha crecido y esté generando innovación, y esté ofreciendo servicios, y esté ofreciendo crecimiento, y esté ofreciendo oportunidades a todo el mundo en el planeta. Si cortamos este fundamento de Internet, este fundamento de la arquitectura de Internet, estamos vulnerando completamente el funcionamiento, y esto es lo que pretenden los operadores de telecomunicaciones con este asunto de lo que ellos llaman fair share. No me gusta el concepto fair share, parece que hubiera algo unfair ocurriendo y no se da la situación. ¿Por qué va en contra de la arquitectura de Internet? Evidentemente, si hay una obligación a negociar, ¿qué ocurre si llega al acuerdo? Hablaban antes de que lo único que queremos, dicen, es que haya un árbitro si no se llega a un acuerdo. Bueno, y el árbitro va a definir el precio, y si el proveedor de servicios decide que ese precio no le conviene, ¿cuáles son las alternativas? ¿Dejar de ofrecer servicio o la operadora va a dejar de cursar el tráfico de ese proveedor de servicio porque no se alcanzó un acuerdo. Yo veo una situación en la que Internet queda fragmentada porque los clientes van a depender de los acuerdos que haya hecho su operadora de telecomunicaciones y del tipo de acuerdos. Al final encontraríamos situaciones en las que ciertos contenidos no llegan a ciertos clientes porque su operadora no logró hacer acuerdo. Y esto es, creo que completamente indeseable tanto para operadoras como para consumidores, como para los proveedores de contenidos. Esto es romper el ecosistema que está funcionando hasta hoy en día, hasta la fecha. Quiere decir, nada impide que haya acuerdos comerciales. El problema aquí es que sean obligatorios. Y se ha hablado antes de regular a las grandes Big Tech. Evidentemente tiene mucho poder, quizá demasiado, y la Comisión Europea está haciendo esfuerzos con el DMA y el DSA para intentar domarlas, si se puede usar esta expresión. Pero intentar regular a los servicios a través de meterles el dinero en el bolsillo, nosotros pensamos que no es la manera. Además, seamos claros, el dinero que salga de las Big Tech a las telco no va a salir en realidad de las Big Tech, sino que ellos le van a meter la mano en el bolsillo a la gente que está alrededor, incluyendo los consumidores. Por lo tanto, es una propuesta nefasta, va en contra de la neutralidad de la red, va en contra de la arquitectura de la red, y es preciso tomar cualquier decisión con mucha cautela, analizando bien todos los pros y todas las contras, y me parece, o nos parece muy precipitado lanzar una propuesta de esta manera sin tener en cuenta todos los factores. Lo dejo aquí de momento y abierto a las preguntas, el diálogo que viene a partir de ahora.
Muchas gracias, David. So we're going to use Spanglish or the panel, I'm afraid. So preguntas, questions from the zero row, la fila cero. So our commentators. We don't have any established order, so maybe Andrés, you raise your hand first. ¿Quieres empezar?
Bueno, muchas gracias por la invitación y muchas gracias a David y a Roslyn por vuestras intervenciones. Y quedándome con la intervención última de David, pues en cierta manera me ha gustado la frase esta de todos contra las telco inicial, porque en el fondo como que casi da más relevancia a lo que vayamos a decir, las telco, los de siempre de la película, ¿no? Y otra que también habla más de tomar partido por Internet, que también me hace gracia porque, en cierta manera, ¿qué significa tomar partido por Internet? O sea, hablamos de Internet de hace 40 o 50 años porque parece que, en cierta manera, algunos nos hemos quedado en el libro del Génesis, pero es que resulta que la manzana la mordimos hace mucho tiempo y tenemos que lidiar con ello, ¿no? Entonces, para aclarar también unas partes, o sea, yo creo que todas las empresas de telecomunicaciones, y lo hemos dicho en la sesión anterior, ¿no? Si vamos al concepto, digamos, de neutralidad de red, estamos de acuerdo. Nosotros no hemos degradado el tráfico, no hemos elegido ganadores, no hemos controlado la experiencia del usuario y, aparte de otras cosas, no hemos degradado el tráfico, no hemos degradado determinados servicios o no, si no llegamos, he visto la imagen con Netflix, si no llegásemos a un Netflix, nunca se ha degradado el tráfico de Netflix. Entre otras cosas porque los propios usuarios nos hubiesen castigado, nos hubiesen penalizado, se hubiesen cambiado de compañía a una que hubiese respetado ese acuerdo con Netflix. O sea, sería, incluso desde la óptica comercial de empresa, sería absurdo proceder a degradaciones de ese lado, ¿no? Pero digamos, nosotros hemos importado un debate que nos vino de Estados Unidos sin tener una evidencia de casos justificados que diesen esa regulación. Y somos presos de ella ahora mismo. Somos presos de ella. Pero es que además, aún justificando eso, que Roslyn ha apuntado un poco en su presentación de por qué hemos llegado a esa regulación, aún justificando esos hechos, el Internet de 2015 no tiene nada que ver con el de 2023. Y todos los nuevos desarrollos que vamos a requerir de Internet de las cosas, de metaverso y tal, van a requerir tratamientos especializados que están permitidos en el reglamento de Internet actual y que las propias guías de BEREC de junio del año pasado permiten, pero que no son suficientes porque trasladan la carga de la prueba al operador. Y entonces nosotros tenemos que estar permanentemente justificando que tenemos que dar un tratamiento especializado para determinados servicios. A medida que estos crezcan, esto va a ser insostenible. Y no nos crea seguridad jurídica. ¿Y qué implica eso? Que es que todas las inversiones que tenemos que realizar para 5G y que deben ser monetizadas para que tengan sentido, quedan en el aire. Quedan en el aire porque no nos vamos a arriesgar a que nos llegue un regulador de este o tal país y nos tire abajo determinado modelo, ¿no? Entonces, en base a eso, yo quería hacer dos preguntas, ¿no? Una para David, y es que en base a eso, de que el desarrollo del 5G requiere grandes sumas de dinero para ser desplegado y que estos, evidentemente, deben ser monetarizados, esa inseguridad jurídica que supone la regulación actual nos lo impide. Entonces, ¿cuál es el modelo que desde Internet Society, para asegurar esa rentabilidad de las inversiones en infraestructura, se propone, ¿no? En cierta manera, ¿no? Porque está claro que yo creo que todos los que estamos en esta mesa, todos los que hemos tenido, queremos la mejor conectividad para todos los europeos y queremos que precisamente no sigamos quedándonos atrás en desarrollo 5G, ¿no? Y para Roslyn, switch to English. In your opinion, what steps should be taken at the European level in the short and medium term to guarantee a framework of growth and legal security for the development of new services in the region? Y ya creo que me he extendido de más, pero gracias.
Gracias. So, who wants to go first? Maybe David, because the first question was for you.
Okay, I can go first. Me parece un poco sorprendente que por un lado se diga que no hay ningún problema con la neutralidad de red y sin embargo se le ataque por todos los frentes. Voy a compartir otra y esta está sacada esta mañana del último informe de inversores de Telefónica. Dice aquí, nuestra cobertura 5G en la última línea. Alcanza el 86% de la población en España. No he sacado la de fibra óptica, que también saca pecho Telefónica y las otras operadoras del mercado en España, de los altísimos niveles de casas pasadas. El mayor de Europa, si no me equivoco. Entonces, este tema de que no hay dinero para las inversiones, pues no lo tengo tan claro. Y de hecho, políticos en toda Europa, Alemania, Italia, Holanda, dicen, dinero hay, dinero público incluso hay. Entonces, este investment gap del que se habla no está tan claro. Otra cosa es monetizarlo, que llegue a tiempo el retorno, que dé suficiente dinero para retribuir a los accionistas. Pero bueno, cada uno tiene su plan de negocio y su labor en este ecosistema. Los panaderos hacen pan, las empresas de telecomunicaciones despliegan infraestructuras y los proveedores de servicio capturan el valor que pueden en ello. Yo creo que esto es así.
So, well, thank you for the question. I'd like to take one step back. This idea about closing the digital divide, it goes back for many years. And already in 2021, the United Nations made a report about this, and it observes 2.6 billion people are not online today, and maybe about $2 trillion of gap. And here in the European Union, it's something like 174 billion euros, and 40 to 50 million Europeans are underserved. And even USA, which is right now leading in 5G adoption, there's as many as 20 to 50 million Americans without broadband at the FCC's required speed, and a significant investment gap in rural areas. Now, from the US perspective, there's an exploration of using the Universal Service Fund and bringing the big tech companies into the fund where they would contribute to cover this cost. For example, affordable connectivity, vouchers for end users, as well as to pay for the gaps in rural networks. But that makes sense for USA because there's an established regulatory mechanism. We don't have that here in the European Union. We don't have a pan-European taxing authority. And it's a concern because there's not a federal approach to distributing the money. But I think we should learn from South Korea, because here's a country which is considered #1 in broadband by many measures. And it's a nation that wants to explore its, it wants to export its content. It wants to create its own platforms that compete directly with China and USA and Japan. And there, they see the investment in the network as an input to the larger content industry. So if you go to a concert, you will have AR, VR for your, with 5G. You have an avatar for the celebrities. You can use your 5G at home to upload your own cooking show on a Korean platform or Webtoon. So they see it's integrated content and networks together because it's a national strategy. And it's working. They want to compete directly, and they have a very different vision. And they are achieving the goals, and they also have in mind a new digital order based upon human rights, where the privacy is baked into the platform, it's baked into the content. And this, I would say, is almost a European concept in a more evolved way, in a productized way. So Korea has always been what people call the third way, or the third approach. It's not American, it's not Chinese, it is Korean. And we can learn a lot from it. And even today, as we learned just a few days ago, Netflix resolved a dispute that they had been fighting for 3 years. They brought lawsuit in South Korea, and they now agreed to pay network usage fees. And they will have an integrated, advanced Netflix product with their CDN deep inside the network. And this is an AI version of Netflix, which is more advanced than what we can get in Europe. And actually, Netflix gets an advantage that it can market its products through the ISP. The ISP will keep a portion of the revenue to pay for the network, but Netflix will be assured an excellent distribution in South Korea, even better than today. But the point here, I think, for this conference is that the internet is more than entertainment. Even though entertainment is perhaps 80% of the internet, we need it. We need the internet for education, for health, for government, for many other services. And there's not necessarily the business models for that, but we still have to make sure that everyone can access it, and that it has to be paid for. And this is why we need to look at broadening the base of the contributions, and that everybody needs to participate. And that's a notion that South Korea has understood from the beginning. I think that's why they're #1 in the world for access, use, and skills, because they understand everyone must participate: content providers, public sector, and users. And it's even a notion I think Europeans can appreciate. So just to close, when we go back to fundamental principles, if you read the original internet documentation, it was not a kind of ideology. These were engineers who wanted to see what would work. They were not embedded into somebody's ideology today. They were interested in pragmatism. And so they didn't subscribe to the notions that we talk about. And if anything, our internet has to evolve. We have concerns about security and privacy and investment, and we need to evolve our policy so that it delivers those things. We don't want the internet from 2003. It was very slow. Few people had it. We want a modern internet that keeps evolving and gets better all the time, not one that was defined 40 years ago. We want one that's best built for today and that keeps getting better all the time.
Thank you. So it looks we have some disagreements on Korea. So more comments, questions? Okay, María. Yeah, como quieras.
Bueno, a ver, como se ha dicho ya antes, la Comisión Europea, y en boca del comisario Breton, ya ha dicho que la neutralidad de la red no se ve amenazada por el fair share y que no tiene nada que ver. Y de hecho, utilizar estos argumentos por parte de las Big Tech es malo para Europa y distrae, es una bomba de humo, distrae del debate que tenemos que tener, que es que Europa necesita inversiones en sus infraestructuras digitales, en sus redes de telecomunicaciones. Y es hora de que los grandes generadores de tráfico, las Big Tech, acepten que tienen un papel en todo esto. A mí me parece una visión muy simplista el decir que porque las operadoras saquemos pecho de los resultados anuales signifique que no tenemos problemas de inversión. Los problemas están ahí y van a seguir estando. Al final, como decíamos en la mesa anterior, que la solución sea que al final pague el usuario final, pues no es una opción, porque estamos sometidos a una fuerte hipercompetitividad y el entorno no nos es favorable para hacer eso. Entonces, tiene que cambiar el modelo. Las Big Tech defienden un mercado basado en unas redes best effort, donde no haya que pagar por un uso de la red. Y esto es una pregunta para Roslyn y cambio al inglés. Related with the markets based on best efforts. For example, is it possible to describe the metaverse as a basic internet application with a best efforts connectivity? Or perhaps could be considered as a specialized service that requires a level of quality? I mean, metaverse or other services or applications that need to be considered as specialized services and need special requirements of the network. Are the operators has to invest to pay for this?
May I answer the question?
Sure, go for it.
Yes, so thank you for this question. I think this is really a key question, and in England, in UK, Ofcom is very engaged on this question because the idea with net neutrality is a kind of best effort service. You offer your service and the operator does the best it can. The EU created the specialized service exemption and also 5G slicing precisely for things like the metaverse, where you have to have a low latency, you need advanced capacity, and this was to be organized by the operator and the content provider together. They would work out how to do it technologically and financially. So we could see that as the UK is moving forward with the modernized net neutrality, Facebook has gone in, or Meta, and said, no, we need metaverse on best effort service. You know, we don't want to pay for specialized service. And for me, I find this is a form of arbitrage because essentially what Meta is saying is everyone should be paying the upgraded capacity cost for their service. And the metaverse is supposed to be 80% of the internet. It will be huge. But not everybody wants to be on the metaverse. You know, there's some concerns about that, whether it's going to have privacy concerns, competitive concerns, and so on. So to me, this is a perfect example of the arbitrage displayed by big tech to force or to externalize their costs on the public for something that should be privatized to them, or at least what they could work out with their own customers. So another example on this front, the EU has very little demonstration of 5G slicing and specialized services. The operators are very concerned to try it. They are afraid they will be considered violating the rules. So there has been a chilling effect in investment on this area in EU. And it's very unfortunate, particularly in UK, where they are seeing a lack of investment, and in EU. The mobile market in Europe is growing at less than 1% a year. This is a dying market. It is very unfortunate. Now, I know that David gave an example in Spain. I think there's some maybe exceptions, but overall in the EU, we are not delivering the level of investment we need. So I would just say that in every other industry in the world, we have two-sided market models. We have ways that content providers and specialized services exist, so the end users don't have to pay the full cost. This is what the Koreans already recognized. They know that Netflix is a cool service, but it has only 6 million subscribers in a country with 50 million people. Either 50 million people pay for the entirety of Netflix, or the 6 million customers do, then it's going to be much more expensive. So here, Netflix is going to make an arrangement with the broadband providers to share the cost. That keeps the price affordable for the end users, who can also have advertising, and it ensures that the networks are available for everyone, for every service. This should not be a religious point. This is a business arrangement, something common across dozens of industries. This is what the court found in 3 years of lawsuits brought by Netflix, which had settled because otherwise they were going to have a very embarrassing loss in that country. This way they settled so they don't have to disclose the terms. In any case, Europe is missing out on much needed investment today, and it's time to review the rules we've had for 10 years, which have really failed to deliver the results they've promised.
Thank you. David, I don't know, you have raised your hand, so please.
Yeah, just wanted to react because perhaps it was not clear in my intervention earlier. I talked also about the Netflix arrangement in South Korea, and I think this way of collaborating is the way forward. Collaboration between content providers and telco operators. What we are discussing here is it's a totally different scenario where there would be an obligation to negotiate, and this is completely different of what we are speaking. I hear different arguments here that this is not in conflict with net neutrality, yet net neutrality is the worst thing that is happening to the European ecosystem. What is the message that you want to convey here? That net neutrality rules should be dismantled? I don't think so, because these are the ones that have brought internet to what it is today, a tool for good for everybody, a place where companies, small and big, can innovate, and a source of prosperity for a lot of people. Now, there's one thing, and I'm going to turn back to Spanish, voy a volver a español. Se ha hablado del Parlamento Europeo y esa resolución, ese parágrafo, se me mezclan los idiomas, ese párrafo en el que se da una especie de mandato para buscar una solución para que todos los actores de la cadena de valor contribuyan al despliegue. Ese está ahí, pero tiene una coletilla final que mi amigo Gonzalo se ha olvidado de mencionar, que es respetando las reglas de neutralidad de red. Voy a enseñar una cosa que ha publicado el regulador ARCEP este verano, el regulador francés. Está en francés, pero yo creo que todo el mundo lo va a entender. Es un cómic muy sencillo que explica el riesgo, lo que hay en juego. Entiendo que se puede ver ya.
Sí, se ve yo un poco.
Entonces,
pequeñito.
En el cuadro que falta, aquí pone: esta obra no está disponible con su proveedor de acceso a Internet. Y la familia que está visitando el museo, la señora se pregunta: ¿y será que con nuestro proveedor de acceso a Internet sí que podríamos ver los brazos? Esto es lo que está en juego. Y esto preocupa. Esto es lo que se está proponiendo. Y el regulador francés es muy claro en este mensaje. Esto está publicado en su último informe de la situación de Internet en Francia. Y este es el gran tema de discusión hoy aquí sobre la mesa.
More comments? Maybe to follow up with or to give the floor also to the big text, because we only have one, so please, Ignacio.
Empiezo yo si queréis.
Sí.
Perdón, si antes hablábamos de que estábamos de acuerdo con la neutralidad de Internet, ahora parece que queremos reformar todas las reglas y replanteárnoslas, ¿no? Entonces, yo creo que hay que tratar de ser un poco coherentes en el sentido de que si todos estamos de acuerdo en que hay que respetar la neutralidad de Internet, habrá que ver cómo esa propuesta en concreto respeta o no la neutralidad de red y ver los incentivos que genera. y si es necesario reformar esas normas, se discute, pero hay que ver también los riesgos que supone y que ha supuesto también la neutralidad de red para el mercado, que yo creo que ha sido positivo, porque el crecimiento de Internet no se entendería sin la neutralidad de red, que creo que es importante, tal y como reconocemos todos, insisto. O sea, si hay un tema en el que estamos de acuerdo, tratemos de no despejarnos. Entonces, yo tenía varias preguntas también para los ponentes. La primera, y luego ya continúo en inglés, la primera es sobre un comentario sobre tanto las opiniones del BEREC como del Tribunal de Justicia de la Unión Europea sobre el tema de las Zero Tariff Options. Para David, hablando un poco también ligándolo un poco con lo que hablábamos del crecimiento del tráfico, ¿no? Pues el crecimiento del tráfico tan malo no será si no se quiere cobrar por él, cuando solo es una tarifa de tipo cero. Y la otra para Rosalind, and I change to English. If you allow payments between OETs and telco providers, that's not a risk that it creates a negative incentive. Just to give you an example, in Spain, years ago, Telefónica bought the main TV content provider. One of the commitments that was included when that merger operation, what M&A was closed, since Telefónica had the network and the content, they create an obligation to not demote the contents of other content providers. So if this is a competition, if this creates a competition problem, most of the telco operators now have content. So they will create, and they will be in both sides of the market, and allowing that payments will create an incentive for them to favor their own content in comparison with the content of other TV providers, as for example Netflix or YouTube.
If I may respond. Well, first, I would like to say thank you to David and to all of the Zero Row for indulging me. I'm sorry to not speak Spanish, and I apologize if I have maybe not fully understood the comments. I do know the gist of the perspectives, and I hope that the points I'm making will come across. First to clarify, Europe takes a fundamental rights approach, and that is the choice of the European voters, and I respect that. If the European voters want a net neutrality rule, so be it. You know, my job as a policy researcher is simply to look at the data and see whether the policy fulfilled the goal. I'm concerned because I see the end user rights are being abridged, because rights to education and healthcare through the internet have been limited because of the net neutrality rules, the prohibition on zero rating, for example. So I just want to, that's the point that I'm making. I respect that that's the choice of the European Parliament. And I'm a European voter, I'm a European citizen. So that is the first point. So even in that way, the way the European law is written, if Europe decides to regulate the consumer side of the market, it can regulate the business side of the market or the content side. There's no inconsistency. Both of those things can exist together to achieve a fundamental rights regime. So it's an absolutely logical point. We don't need to debate that. So the idea that fair share would violate net neutrality is wrong. The European Parliament and Commission can make rules that fulfill the law. There's no doubt of that. As far as South Korea, I would say that the government has really tried to take hands-off approach. They don't want to set the price. They want the parties to figure out the rules themselves. But they do attempt to make a framework so there's good faith negotiation and a duty to deal. And presently, there is a law in progress called the Free Ride Prevention Act. Unfortunately, because some parties have not come to the table, and that is, there's no penalty if you don't pay. So that's part of the challenge in South Korea. I think Europe, if it wants to facilitate a negotiation, it needs to have a framework, and it needs to have incentives to keep people to have the conversation. And certainly to say, if you look at what happened in Australia with the News Media Bargaining Code, the government made a policy to force Google and Facebook to negotiate, and actually When it did that, Facebook and Google came forward. Today, the payments made in Australia cover 20% of the salaries of journalists. This is seen as important in Australia to ensure that the local news media continues. They don't want to have news just from UK or Japan or USA. They want Australian news. The Canadians see similarly. I'm not saying that that's the solution for everything, but there is a challenge. If you are a small European country, you have very little power in the face of big tech because their revenue and market cap is probably larger than the GDP of your entire country. So in this way, the European Union is attempting to provide the necessary authority and strength for the European Union to preserve its objectives and goals and preserve the competition, the connectivity, and those things. And finally, a point on BEREC. I was certainly disappointed to see that BEREC made a report about this policy before there was anything published by the European Commission. They were not instructed to perform such a report, so I don't know why they even did it. They relied on data that was more than 10 years old, was not seem relevant. So, to me, it isn't convincing that they did that, particularly when so many other regulators in other jurisdictions have a different point of view, and they at least attempt to have a consultation. So what I'd say is it's only appropriate that European Union investigates what's going on and improve. Right now in Europe, our Digital Economy and Society Index, it's not great. It's in the middle of the road for some countries, but half of the European countries are below the average. So we should be worried if European Commission did not look at this problem, because they'd look at as if they were ignoring the challenges we have in Europe today. So it needs to be examined. They're doing that. We can all participate. And I think we should look at all the options on the table.
Yeah, I agree with that. It is important to analyze all with a lot of detail all the situation. As I said, it seems that this is more problem looking for a solution. Just the opposite. A solution looking for, in the search for a problem. Because evidence shows it that way. And I think that no matter how many times you say this is not against net neutrality, well, in fact, it is completely opposite. And regarding the zero rating question, sí, evidentemente es una situación un poco esquizofrénica, que por un lado las operadoras tuvieran aquel apetito por crear tráfico y ahora de repente parece que el tráfico da problemas. En cualquier caso, los análisis demuestran que los incrementos estos exponenciales en tráfico no generan OPEX adicional, porque las redes están diseñadas así que no hay ningún problema. Lo que sí que me trae el recuerdo de una parte importante de este debate, y es porque este tema del zero rating también se debate mucho en Brasil, y es que este asunto de fair share o de cost sharing está saltando a otras jurisdicciones, supongo que en parte llevado por los mismos actores y habrá otros motivos, pero lo vemos en Brasil, lo vemos en la India. De manera que es un motivo adicional para tomar las decisiones adecuadas, porque otras jurisdicciones están mirando lo que hace Europa, y como siga esta tendencia, vamos a encontrarnos con una Internet fragmentada que yo creo que no es precisamente lo que queremos.
Thank you. Any other comments, Eusebio? And then
Yes.
we will open we'll still have some time. We will open to the audience.
I'm going to be quick. Actually, I don't have any questions, so you can be relaxed right now on the other side of the screen. Sorry, Rosalind, I'm going to pick up some of the things that you brought into the table, and I will just try to make it in Spanish because I can see the faces here, and I think we should stay back to the original matter of topic of this table, which is net neutrality and not fair share. Y ahora cambio en español, ¿de acuerdo? Voy a empezar por una pequeña afirmación, pero para ilusiones. No, los operadores no queremos acabar con Internet, porque vivimos de Internet. O sea que tranquilos, ni el fair share ni la neutralidad de red tiene que ver con querer acabar con Internet. Todo lo contrario. Eso por un punto que lo tengo apuntado porque se han comentado muchas cosas y tengo que pasar por ellas. Lo segundo, los operadores estamos totalmente de acuerdo con la neutralidad de la red. Lo que no estamos de acuerdo es con la regulación que se ha implantado para asegurar esa neutralidad de la red, que tiene unas grandes lagunas y genera unas grandes tanto incongruencias en el propio redactado de la regulación como genera inseguridad en la propia interpretación, pero por tanto inseguridad jurídica que para hacer negocios es básico. Eso para que quede claro a la audiencia que no es que estemos en contra de la neutralidad de la red. Y eso va al hilo de por qué nació la neutralidad de la red. Y antes se ha comentado al señor Hu, al quien respeto en profundidad, no lo conozco personalmente, pero lo respeto en profundidad. Y básicamente lo que se quería en aquella época era que nadie pudiese hacer que alguien no pudiese ver. El ejemplo que el señor David ha puesto antes es que yo no pueda ir a una exposición y no pueda ver un cuadro. Pero nadie dice que en esa exposición yo no puedo poner mejores focos en el cuadro de las meninas o darle una sala más grande y dejar un cuadro del Bosco que no le puede dar mucho la luz en un sitio más oscuro. De eso se trata. Y eso es lo que impide la actual regulación de la neutralidad de la red. Porque aquí se habla muchas veces, y voy a insistir, no es la neutralidad de la red lo que nos preocupa, sino la regulación o la ley. En este caso, una regulación, una directiva. Pues eso por un lado. Y luego voy a hablar un poco de las consecuencias que traía como un ejemplo muy amplio, pero lo voy a dejar muy tranquilo. Para lo que ha servido la neutralidad de la red, y Rosalind lo ha explicado ya, es para que lo que antes comenzaba a ser un floreciente mercado de proveedores de servicios sobre Internet en Europa prácticamente haya muerto. O desde luego no hayan florecido ni han adquirido la capacidad y la escala suficiente a nivel mundial para sobrevivir. Os voy a recordar una cosa también. WhatsApp era europeo. Y como estaba teniendo una gran escala y era muy potente, lo compraron. ¿De acuerdo? En aquel momento de WhatsApp no había neutralidad de la red. ¿Alguien se le ha cortado WhatsApp, su operador? ¿O alguien le ha cortado Netflix, su operador? Por favor, seamos serios cuando hablamos sobre los peligros que se nos tienen encima, ¿no? Sobre los, decía antes mi colega, disculpa, que son incentivos negativos. Estoy de acuerdo. Hay que proteger a los proveedores de servicios sobre los incentivos negativos. Pero ¿qué incentivo negativo es que yo le venda a alguien una conectividad que tenga la calidad asegurada? No a mí mismo, sino a un tercero. ¿Dónde tengo yo el incentivo negativo? Entonces te comentan, porque te pagan. Bien. Y si alguien quiere competir con ese señor que tiene mejor calidad, me tendrá que pagar también. Sería la consecuencia lástima. Y alguien dice, es que eso no funciona, eso no vale en un mercado. Que tú pagues por mayor calidad hace que no pague por esa calidad no puede competir contigo. Y es que la respuesta es claro. Esa es la respuesta. Y eso es justo lo que está impidiendo la neutralidad de la red. La ley, perdón. Eso iba por un lado. Por otro es, esta regulación, igual que toda la argumentación a favor de la neutralidad de la red que compartimos, siempre ha sido para intentar evitar que nadie tuviese un mal comportamiento. Lo que ocurre es que los resultados, una vez que tú tienes una ley y ves los resultados, o sea, y mides cómo ha sido el resultado de esa ley, resulta que ves que efectivamente en Europa no ha habido ningún problema de neutralidad de la red, lo reconoce el propio regulador y el propio BEREC, que no ha habido ningún problema, que los problemas que había antes fueron exclusivamente, y en pequeña proporción, con llamadas sobre el acoso IP, con el Skype, ¿os acordáis? Pero nunca más ha habido un problema. Y la ley sigue ahí. Sin embargo, Hay otras cosas que se pueden medir, que es lo que no hace Pérez en su informe, por cierto, cuando quiere hacer el assessment para decir que en la neutralidad de red sí prohíbe el fair share, cosa que no estoy de acuerdo, pero no entraremos en esto hoy, yo al menos. Cuando hace ese assessment, no mira cuáles son las consecuencias que ellos han provocado, no Pérez concretamente, sino que ha provocado la regulación en el conjunto del mercado, porque eso sí que va en contra de los usuarios. En principio, la protección del usuario con la neutralidad de la red era para que pudieses acceder a cualquier servicio u ofrecer cualquier servicio. Bien, pues eso no se ha prohibido, no ha pasado en Europa. No se ha habido ni un solo prohibición, ni servicio que se haya cortado, ni nadie que haya podido sacar el servicio. Eso no ha ocurrido. Sin embargo, hemos destrozado el mercado emprendedor europeo. Hemos evitado que hagan en la escala mundial suficiente como para tener campeones. Y acabo. Casualmente, y ahí Roslyn ya lo ha explicado bastante bien, con datos, en aquellas regiones donde no se adoptó la neutralidad de la red, por circunstancias que no vamos a hablar ahora mismo del caso, tienen campeones nacionales. China tiene no uno, ni dos, ni tres, y además algunos de ellos del tamaño parecido a los grandes de Internet, lo cual sería sano, ¿no?, en un mercado que alguien pueda competir. Pasó lo mismo con Rusia y seguro que utilizáis Telegram más de uno, a pesar de los pesares, pero bueno, es una manera. Pero existen otros muchos. ¿Y sabéis dónde están saliendo los competidores de los actuales campeones de Internet? Justo donde no existe regulación de neutralidad de la red. Por ejemplo, en Estados Unidos, donde Snapchat comienza a ser ya algo de uso bastante importante, amenazando el liderazgo tanto. Quizás de Apple no, pero desde luego está amenazando el liderazgo de otras aplicaciones de comunicación y de redes sociales. Por lo tanto, yo quisiera acabar mi intervención sin ninguna pregunta. Los operadores estamos totalmente de acuerdo con la neutralidad de la red. Vivimos de que utilicéis todos los servicios que existen de Internet y de que os vendamos y de que podáis ofrecerlos a través de nuestras redes. No estamos de acuerdo con la regulación actual, porque creemos que lo único que ha hecho ha sido impedirnos a los operadores, entre otras cosas, poder crecer también en Internet. Porque, si os pongo un ejemplo de CDNs, nos impiden priorizar tráfico en el acceso a Internet, nos lo impiden, y nuestro cliente lo quiere. Y alguien podrá pensar, ¿me lo estoy inventando? No me lo invento. Si vosotros vais ahora mismo a un señor que quiere ofrecer contenidos de calidad en Internet, de vídeo, os vais a Cloudflare. Y pongo ese ejemplo porque es que lo podéis encontrar en Internet. Y veréis que de las 4 ofertas que tiene, una pone literalmente Network Prioritization, que estaba en inglés. Priorización en red. Perdón, pero eso no hemos quedado que no era así. Es decir, que los contenidos dentro de alguien que tiene el 75% del mercado de CDNs, es decir, de la distribución de contenidos que no son propiedad como de Netflix o de otros señores, ¿puede priorizar los contenidos? Es decir quién puede o no puede ver un vídeo o con qué calidad. ¿Pero en qué hemos quedado entonces? ¿Hemos regulado a quien realmente no podía, a quien no debíamos? ¿O es que Bueno, lo que quiero decir con todo esto es que los objetivos que buscaba la regulación de neutralidad de la red no se han conseguido, porque es que ni siquiera había que hacer nada. Volviendo a coger palabras que antes se han repetido y que han repetido más gente, que creo que va a ser casi un moto para esta reunión, es que la neutralidad de la red, la regulación, fue una solución buscando un problema. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Eusebio. So before we let our panelists, David and Roslyn, do some concluding remarks, any questions from the audience? ¿Algunas preguntas? Juan Luis? So we can do them all in raw, so if there are any others, because we are running out of time, so si tenéis alguna pregunta las hacemos todas seguidas y ya concluimos con la intervención de David y de Roslyn.
David, siento que no te hayas incorporado al panel anterior, porque obviamente gran parte de tu contenido era más bien del panel anterior, en el que hemos debatido muchas de las cosas que han planteado y me da pena que nos abusamos aquí a la audiencia intentando contestar a lo que has planteado y volvamos a repetir el panel anterior. La constancia me parece que has comentado tantas inexactitudes que en teoría largo tiempo. Lo de Corea ya se ha debatido, vais a provocar al final que el gobierno coreano se enfade y estas cosas. Y estáis diciendo al principal país o al país líder en tantos ámbitos. Segundo, la afirmación de que la Internet va a desaparecer. Ya hemos escuchado tantas veces, David, que cuando Estados Unidos acabó con la neutralidad de la red, todo se llenó de esos titulares, Internet va a desaparecer. Amenaza
Gracias, Juan Luis. ¿Alguna otra pregunta o comentario? So I'm not sure, Roslyn and David, whether you could hear Juan Luis, because it looks like the wireless mic doesn't work very well. Anyway, we have a few minutes for each of you to do some, like wrap up, concluding remarks, and we close with that. So, yeah, who wants to go first?
I'm happy to go first.
Okay, thank you.
First, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I want to thank David as well for his intervention, and to the panel. It is great to hear from you. I hope that we can continue to engage going forward. And I just have a simple point to conclude, is that we can protect openness with soft rules. They have been shown to deliver innovation in many countries. And presently in EU, we're not getting the payoff for the hard rules. It's not delivering the innovation that we expected. So I think we should consider having soft rules, which we actually had before in EU, and they were working very well. And particularly because soft rules would allow us to provide free services for education, for healthcare, for the poor, for refugees, and so forth. We have a problem in European Union with reduced innovation. Our investment is not at the level it should be. The European Union is behind on connectivity. It's behind on 5G. We need 174 billion to get our 2030 goals. And for this reason, I support that the European Union would go forward with exploring a way to broaden contributions to achieve this, however it may be done. And this, in fact, would deliver the stated goals of net neutrality, which are to improve the end user access with greater investment and deployment. Of course, having more networks for everyone, that's the goal that we want. We want to have continued investment. We want next generation connectivity. And it's time that the content providers, Google, Facebook, Meta, Netflix, Amazon, Apple, TikTok, they need to get on board to make this possible. They can't keep sitting on the sidelines and saying that, that they're just entitled to have delivery of their traffic. They need to participate financially. And that is a fundamental rights approach of the EU, and it's something that we should support.
And, well, I think we have an agreement on the importance of dialogue and collaboration between the stakeholders that are part of this ecosystem. I think that is the solution. Instead of mandated negotiations, having the door open for agreements. This is how the internet has been created, and that's how it works better. Otherwise, we are going to break it, and we are going to end up with a fragmented internet, which is not what we want. Thank you for organizing, and thank you for inviting us.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for your attention and comments. So we stop here. There is more IGF tomorrow. So with artificial intelligence and other interesting sessions, and we have a long discussion ahead. It looks on this topic. So probably we'll see each other next year and maybe for another 20 years of net neutrality. Okay, thank you everyone.
Thank you, David.
Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you.
Pues simplemente que os esperamos mañana, a primera hora.